Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane." Writers Abel uses direct quotation from King in his article on the quality of healthcare because of the argument that healthcare should be considered to be an undeniable right. Anyone who is familiar with inequality should agree that everyone should be able to have access to healthcare and receive the same treatment. Before the Civil Rights Act was passed, African Americans were segregated throughout society. When seeking healthcare, they'd have to wait long periods of time before even being seen. They'd also at times be denied care. For example, black patients would be housed in black wards and dank cellars, and emergency rooms would turn away dying non-white patients. Another example of this is African American mothers having to go through childbirth alone. Throughout the last 50 years, African Americans have continuously experienced racism and mistreatment after seeking treatment from hospitals, despite the fact that healthcare should be considered to be an undeniable right. And as a result, African Americans are less likely to seek healthcare than whites. However, a study done by the Institute of Medicine has shown that there is more to this gap in healthcare. The IOM study asserted that much more was at play. It declared that even given the same insurance, the same income, the same type of treatment facility, people of color were less likely to receive quality care. This theory is very useful because it sheds light on the disparity in healthcare. Despite having access to the same opportunities, for example, income and insurance, African Americans are less likely than whites to receive quality care. This presents that biases throughout healthcare need to be addressed, and that the disparity in healthcare is not only due to economic factors. Dr. Jangi Seshwat writes an article on this issue in order to address patients' mistrust of the medical system and doctors' unconscious biases that found black patients are almost twice likely to have diabetes, are 30% more likely to die from heart disease, and the most obese ethnic group in the United States. Black babies are more likely than two times more likely to die before their first birthday. Although they are more likely to be at risk of illness, patients of color do not seek treatment due to fear of mistreatment by physicians. However, in some cases, stereotypes can help doctors make decisions about medical treatment. This is because if doctors form a stereotype based off racial groups, it may help them provide better treatment for patients. Wright discussed this by quoting a study done by Dr. Satel on racial patterns. Wright's point is that some racial groups respond to treatment differently, and knowing this will help doctors form a better treatment plan. When it comes to practicing medicine, stereotyping often works, she wrote, listing a number of racial patterns that guide her clinical choices. Blacks appear to metabolize antidepressants slower, so she starts all black patients on low doses. Blacks do well on hepatitis C treatment, so she counsels all black patients on the limited chances of success. Sato argues that these stereotypes can be beneficial in healthcare because some treatments work differently for African Americans. For example, antidepressants work slower. But there are times when stereotypes are not beneficial. Doctors who form stereotypes against minorities and allow them to affect their judgment while treating patients are more likely to assume that blacks abuse substances. Kai Wright analyzed this throughout medicine by writing an article. Van Rye found doctors are more likely to hold a host of negative beliefs about the black patients. They presume to be more likely to abuse drugs or alcohol and less likely to be educated, to comply with physicians' instructions, to an active lifestyle, or to participate in cardiac rehab if prescribed. I agree that doctors hold stereotypes about African Americans, and this point needs emphasizing because this leads to patients distrusting their physicians. Research has been done to prove the racial disparities in healthcare. What can researchers take from this to come up with a solution? One study showed American doctors are less likely to administer clot-busting drugs to blacks having a heart attack. Another revealed they are less likely to refer them for cardiac catheterization. None of the doctors in the research were outwardly racist, but their misjudgments were shaped by their unconscious bias. Studies show that doctors are less likely to administer treatment to blacks. These doctors aren't necessarily considered to be racist. However, their misjudgments seen throughout their actions are formed by their unconscious bias. According to Seshwat's point, I would point out that although doctors are unaware of it, they form biases that affect their behavior and affect the overall treatment of patients. John Stone takes this further by quoting in his article about how the Institute of Medicine has acknowledged this. After examining numerous studies from the last 10 years, the IOM concluded that racial and ethnic minorities are less likely to receive even Mccune medical procedures, like coronary artery bypass surgery and kidney dialysis, than white Americans. African Americans are more prone to be diagnosed with illnesses, yet they are least likely to seek preventable medical care than whites. These high rates are preventable and would see a decrease if African Americans were able to trust their physicians and felt more comfortable going to them to seek medical advice. Both Dr. Janey Sushra and John Stone are right that blacks are less likely to seek medical care than whites because, as he may or may not know, studies have proven that rates may be high, yet they do not seek help. Racial disparity throughout healthcare is considerably the worst form of inequality because healthcare should be an undeniable right. These healthcare problems can be seen throughout the United States in the last 50 years, although some cases can come across as more prominent. For example, the case of Elsie Lax. Henrietta Lax's daughter was diagnosed with epilepsy and at 10 years old was sent to the Cronefield Medical Center. At this time, Cronefield was home to more patients than it could handle. Cronefield was at record high of more than 2,700 patients, nearly 800 above maximum capacity. This facility also mistreated people of color. Patients were locked in poorly ventilated cell blocks with drains on the floors instead of toilets. During this time, black patients were even often subject to inhumane experience while being treated in facilities similar to Cronefield. Every case of racial disparity is important to address. Racial disparities improved due to the establishment of Medicare and the Civil Rights Act. However, these disparities have continued in the last 50 years. Healthcare is considered to be an undeniable right, and African Americans need to be able to seek treatment and healthcare without the fear of being mistreated and not receiving the healthcare that they deserve. In order to prevent this from continuing in the future, current institutions need to analyze their programs and determine if they mistreat minorities and the extent of which it has occurred. Only then will further changes be made to be able to spread awareness against disparities in healthcare.